Good evening, Winchester. Good evening to the whole world. Anyone watching on Verizon. The views and opinions on Visual Radio Live are those of the host, Joe Viglione. His guests, Rob Fraboni, John Byers, Frank Delastrito, maybe Buzzy Linhart, maybe Valerie Vinay. We don't know. And anyways, let's start the show. We got Rob Fraboni, who is a major record producer, did the Rolling Stones, Keith Richards, hello old friend for Eric Clapton, Planet Waves, Bob Dylan, Martin Scorsese's Mean Streets, and The Last Waltz, the band, The Last Waltz. Now that's an interesting story. That is an interesting story.
Rob here. Leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Well, we're going to try him again. Is there a redialer here? Do I have to redial the thing all over again? There we are, redial. We'll go to phone number 2, and then we'll go back to Rob.
Hi, it's Rob here. Leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
He will get back to us as soon as he can. Now, that's someone I want to talk to on the air, but maybe next week. All right, so let's try this. Let's try this. The show must go on. The show must go on. Why do I do this complicated thing? Because I don't want the phone numbers going out over the air. Busy, busy. Everyone's busy. Too busy for our TV show? Hey, Red Sox are on in the next room. And I don't believe this. Everyone's aware of the show tonight. What's going on?
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
Unbelievable. Okay, so when in doubt, let's try to surprise someone. Let's see if Frank is ready for his show. We'll do Frank right now. And Frank will be in the studio in June. We just don't know where the studio is going to be.
Joe.
Frank, you ready to go early?
Oh, I guess so.
Well, Rob Fraboni didn't pick up, and he's scheduled to be on the show. And John Byers didn't pick up, so you know what? Show got to go on, right?
It's got to go on. Do I get the whole hour?
Well, you can. They can call me on the cell phone if they want to interrupt. How's that?
Well, can is the operative word. I have no idea if I can, but let's give it a shot.
Now, that's a nice movie poster on The Most Dangerous Game.
Which one are you looking at?
The Most Dangerous Game, the green one?
Well, there's a lot of movie I haven't got them in front of me.
Okay.
It's the one that has a big picture of the villain, Count Zaroff?
I don't know. It's just got a green poster.
Oh, well, no, I haven't got it in front of me, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. I thought you knew everything about all movies.
How many times do I have to prove that every week to you, Joe, that that's not the case?
Well, what's the date when you're scheduled to be here? June?
I'm shooting for June 26th.
June 26th. Now, hopefully we'll have our brand new studio on Swanton Street, just a half a mile away. End of June, we very well could. And if not, we might be in here. But you'll be somewhere on TV.
All right. Well, that's very good.
We just don't know, because June is our moving month.
Okay. Well, if there's any chance, let me know ahead of time, because I'm making a special trip. I'll have to be in north of Pittsburgh the week before, and then I'm coming up to see you.
Cool.
With a new book in tow.
Oh, the new book will be out, huh?
Unless something goes wrong, it's going to be out. I think I'm looking at the movie poster now. It's like a photographic negative with, 3 or 4 people's faces? Or no, 2 people's faces, Fay Wray and Joel McRae in it. Is that what you were talking about?
Probably. I don't know. I don't have it in front of me. I'm on the air live.
Okay. Well, you're a brave man. Oh, all right. So, well, I guess we'll get down to tomorrow night's movie, and then we'll see what we can do to fill in time until some other guests call in, huh?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, The Most Dangerous Game, released in September 1932, almost 6 months to the day before King Kong, and that is not a coincidence because this was one of the movies that made King Kong possible. King Kong was going to be so expensive to produce by 1932, 33 standards that they looked for ways to offset the cost, and one of them was to try to film a sister film to it.
Oh.
Almost at the same time. In fact, maybe some of the scenes are at the same time. So it's the same producer and director, a lot of the same productions team.
This is a sister film to King Kong?
It is, well, it is not, it hasn't got a giant ape in it.
Right.
It is made by, the brains behind it is a man who is well known in the genre cult, but whose name is probably being forgotten outside, and that's Merian C. Cooper.
I remember the name.
Who was the father of King Kong. And you'll get debates on that, but if I get in those debates, I'll be able to win for him. And he had the idea for the giant ape film, and he was wondering how to do it and all that. In fact, getting up money. And one of the ways they offset it is they used a lot of the sets in King Kong for The Most Dangerous Game. They used a lot of the same cast. Fay Wray, who played the screaming heroine in King Kong, and Robert Armstrong, who played Carl Denham in King Kong, and Noble Johnson and Steve Clementi, who played the native witch doctor and the native chief in King Kong. And also James Flavin, who was a first mate in both movies, were in both movies. And if you watch King Kong and you watch this movie back to back, you'll see some of the same jungle sets. And the most amusing one is when they filmed King Kong, they made there's a scene where King Kong has to cross a riff, and like a break in the mountains, so there's this deep gorge between them, and it looks as wide and as awesome as can be. But when they film it in this movie, they use the real size of it, which is only like a foot. So for the careful viewer, you can get some treats on that. A lot of the musical scores suggested that they were both scored by the same guy. So this was one of the ways they kept the cost of King Kong down, was by defraying some of the costs to The Most Dangerous Games.
Ah.
You build a set, you charge it to one movie, use it in another movie, keep the costs down. So, and King Kong was probably only made because Cooper was a high-power driving man, and he had a kindred spirit in David O. Selznick. Both of them are at RKO in the early 1930s, so they worked together well. And Most Dangerous Game came out, and the special effects for King Kong kept it in production a lot longer, so that came out 6 months later.
So Dangerous Game was actually the first movie.
Dangerous Game was certainly the first one released. It was probably not the first one conceived, but because it had very little, it's not a special effects movie. There's a couple of camera effects that you probably won't notice the first time you watch it. So it was once the live action was done, the movie was done. It just had to be cut and scored. When King Kong was done, they had to weave it all in with the special effects, the animation, stop motion animation. So that's why King Kong was in production a lot longer. So this one came out first, and I think The Most Dangerous Game was a very popular short story. This is back in the age when short fiction writers were were well known, and there was a lot of short stories. I'd be hard pressed to name a short fiction writer now. And so The Most Dangerous Game was a very famous story. Original title might have been Hounds of Zaroff, because the British title of the movie was Hounds of Zaroff. So
Was it cannibalism?
No. The Most Dangerous Game is you'll find this early in the movie, so I won't be giving away too much. Count Zaroff lives on his remote island, which is the recipient of a lot of shipwrecked people, and he basically stocks his game preserve with him, and the most dangerous game is he hunts man. And so the movie ends with what is really one of the classic chase scenes in 1930s when Zaroff is after his human prey. And I shouldn't say more than that because I'll give it away to people who haven't seen it. Incidentally, this is the best movie that is going to be on anywhere tomorrow night. And this is an excellent movie.
Wow.
And it's a classic action. It's a horror. I guess you'd call it a horror adventure film. It's not a horror film, but the horror cult, the horror genre people really adopted it because of its close kinship to King Kong, and they account Zaroff as a mad doctor, except instead of being into science, he's into hunting. So.
And you get Fay Wray.
And you get Fay Wray, who is in her prime right now.
Does she get eaten by the Count Zaroff or the animals?
Excuse me?
Does she get hunted?
She yes, but as Count Zaroff tells us, you don't hunt do not kill the female of the species. So so he's got other designs on her, and you can guess what they are. And that's why she goes out and joins the hunt, because she'd rather be hunted in the forest than hunted by him in the bedroom. So she's out there in the jungles with them.
When the hunter gets captured by the game.
I won't give away anymore, but it's
that's Martha and the Vandellas. That's
okay. Well, you're always pulling these music analogies on.
When the hunter gets captured by the game, great. They should have used it in the movie.
I don't even know if when was Martha Vandella born?
She was probably born around 38, 39, 40. But
okay, well, she's not born yet, so they couldn't use her songs because she's not around to sing them.
She didn't record it until the 60s, but that's okay.
That's okay. Okay, one man I want to point out in this, and he plays a Cossack in this, named Ivan, and he's kind of a sinister figure. And it's played by an actor named Noble Johnson, who was a black man, and he was a film pioneer, and he for years he had his own studio making what they used to call race films, and these were films designed for black audiences, and they'd play in the South, or they'd play in black neighborhoods of big cities, and there were these, not so much now, but there were these parallel universes in the 1930s. You had Yiddish films, you had ethnic films, like there was a lot of Spanish language production going on, and there were films for black audiences, and Noble Johnson was really a pioneer in that. He would star in them. He would write them, he'd direct them, and he basically had to give up his studio because it was very hard to make ends meet, and his career as a character actor in Hollywood kept getting better, so he just had no choice financially but to leave one behind and go to the other. And he was a black man, but he had very sharp features, so with a little pancake makeup, he could play a Caucasian. In this case, he plays a Cossack. He does play the native chief in King Kong and Son of Kong, but then he's back in another film made by Marion Cooper a year later. 2 years later, She as I don't know what ethnic group he is. They're a group of people.
Now, a movie like She, is that H. Rider Haggard?
Yeah, it's H. Rider Haggard.
So that was remade with Catherine Deneuve, right?
Well, Ursula Andress made a version.
Ursula Andress, thank you.
Yeah, made it in the 1967, I think. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I was around 13, 14 when that came out. I went and saw it at the theater. That was very frightening to a child.
Yeah. So this was the She that Marion. These are all films by Marion Cooper.
I wonder if we can play She.
I doubt that. Yeah, I was shocked to see that Most Dangerous Game was in the public domain. I was, I would have thought that was locked up along with Kong and Son of Kong and all that. I don't know if you can play She. I doubt it's in the public domain, but my ability to predict such things is pretty limited, as I've proven over the years. And so Noble Johnson, he he could, with the right makeup, he could play almost any ethnic he wanted to, which was rare for a black actor. So he was one of the, for a while, I think he was the only member, black man in the Screen Actors Guild. Screen Actors Guild was pretty much all white until the 60s. And you know, he plays an Egyptian, he plays a Nubian, I should say, in The Mummy with Boris Karloff. He plays a half-wit of undetermined ethnic group with Bela Lugosi in Murders in the Rue Morgue. And he's the only actor that is in all of Merian C. Cooper's horror adventures of the 1930s. And that's this movie, Most Dangerous Game.
Fascinating.
Son of Kong and She. He was still around when they made their last horror adventure. When I say they, that's Merian, who was the producer, and Ernest Schoedsack. I always mispronounce his name, and always will. I've given up on trying to correct. But they were kind of a team. Cooper was the hard-driving producer. Schoedsack was the more easygoing director, and they made a handful of movies together. They were well known before this for documentaries. And in case your audience, and a movie like Most Dangerous Game, an adventure story in the jungles, is something that was right up their alley. They had made documentaries during the 1920s, one called Grass, which is about the migrations in Persia, which doesn't sound very exciting, but it really is. And one called Chang that took place in Indochina, Indonesia, about elephants and tigers, and a few others. And they were well known for that. And when Cooper became a power at RKO, everyone was expecting a turn towards that kind of a movie, and no one at all was expecting King Kong, a giant ape movie. And there had been well, you showed it about 2 years ago. I think you showed The Lost World, which was stop-motion animation. And the animator in both movies, the chief animator, because these are large teams, but the chief animator in both movies and the brains behind the animation was a man named Willis O'Brien. And until King Kong came along, Lost World was his masterpiece, but then King Kong obviously became his masterpiece.
Interesting.
The two principal characters in the movie are not played by actors in King Kong. Joel McCrea was mainly known for westerns, and would be known for westerns his whole career. Though when you his most famous movies, his non-westerns, come to the top of the list. Most Dangerous Game is one of them. He had a classic comedy in the 40s called Sullivan's Travels, and he had a Hitchcock movie, Foreign
Sullivan's Travels. Sorry. Hitchcock title again is?
Foreign Correspondent.
Okay. Now, Sullivan's Travels, is that like a takeoff on Gulliver's Travels?
No, that's a, God, it's been 40 years since I've seen the movie. But it's a roving report. It's kind of, if you've seen It Happened One Night, it's close to that as I recall, but I don't want to talk too much about it because I haven't seen it.
Okay, that's all right, but I got a question about Dangerous Game now. Both King Kong and Dangerous Game, did they shoot on sound stages or did they actually go on location somewhere?
No, there's no... Hollywood at this period doesn't like location shooting. They consider it a big risk and a big expense. And there were some films made during the 1920s, most notably Ben-Hur, which was a big hit. But by the time it was done, the box office, the expenses were just through the roof because of the location. These were all made on sound stages. I can't name any off the top of my head, but my guess is you can count on both hands the movies you've heard of during the 1930s that were shot anywhere but Hollywood or locations within a day's drive of Hollywood.
But King Kong had a wonderfully atmospheric study of, you felt like you were in the Congo.
Yes. And you were actually on Catalina Island. Certainly, Son of Kong was when they hit the beach. In both movies, in King Kong and Son of Kong, when they hit the beach, they're on Catalina.
And where's Catalina?
I've never been to Catalina, so if anybody wants to correct me, go ahead. But Catalina has a lot of fog, as islands off the coast of continents usually do, and that could wreak havoc with filming. But it could also give you some really neat effects.
Now, this is off the coast of California, I imagine.
Yeah. Joe, I'm going to sing a song. I'm going to show you that I know something about music, Joe. You don't know the song Catalina?
No.
26 miles across the sea, Santa Catalina, waiting for me. Santa Catalina, the island of romance. Romance, romance, let's dance.
All right, I remember it. Got it.
Okay, well, because of that song, about 20 years ago or 30 years ago, when those parlor trivia games was in, I got a question which I would have had no idea except Santa Catalina. And I answered all the Santa Catalina questions all because of that song. So, but that was, I don't know when it was a hit, but I remember it from my earliest years. So I think
you got to be careful of that now. My brother in school many years ago was asked a question, where does it never rain? And he says Southern California because of the Albert Hammond song. And I said to him, but it never rains in California, it pours. He goes, oh, I didn't think of that. So, yeah, it never rains in Southern California, it pours. Man, it pours.
You do have to be careful because there was a movie called Krakatoa East of Java.
I remember it.
Oh, Krakatoa is actually west of Java. So why they did that, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's east if you go in the wrong direction for all the way around the world. But that's true of every place on Earth. But, Krakatoa is only a few miles west of Java, so why make the 25,000-mile trip when you can do it for like 5 or 6 miles?
They like the ring of Krakatoa east of Java.
It does have a ring.
Flowed. Hey, this is cool stuff. We got you expected on June 26th.
Okay.
Any other tidbits on the most dangerous game?
Yeah, well, the Count Zaroff, who is the character you hear most about, is played by an actor called Leslie Banks. And all these 1930 films creak a bit with age, and because if they were successful, the plot, you see where the plot's going because it's been redone so many times. And if it's not successful, then that speaks to itself. But this was his first sound film, and I was surprised when I read that because he gives an odd performance, but he gives a very good one, I think. And, you can't say that for a lot of actors in the 30s giving in their first sound film. And it's only his second film. He made a film in 1921, which I imagine is lost. I've never seen it and don't expect to. It's an obscure movie. And then 12 years later, he makes this one. And he's quite good in it. And why they hired, an unknown actor from England who didn't make a lot of movies in Hollywood. And this is his first one he's made in 12 years, but he pulls it off. One thing to know about him, there is an important part of the plot is a scar that Count Zaroff has on his left temple that may account for his madness. And actually, Leslie Banks was scarred in World War I, and so badly that it kind of ruined his career as a leading man. By our standards, he's very short for a leading man, but not in those days. Those days, those actors tended to be short. And but he would play roles and basically put his scarred, I don't mean hideously scarred, but enough so that you wouldn't make him a romantic lead. But he would not cover that up in movies. He would display it, and he'd use it as part of his parts. And I imagine, I'm pretty sure this that we see on his temple is makeup. But I'm not.
Hold on, Frank. Hey, Rob, can I call you? I'll call you right back. All right, thanks. Bye.
Okay, it sounds like the first team is in.
Sorry, people, to do that to you, but that's Rob Fraboni. I want to just end by saying Louis Jourdan in Octopussy starts chasing man in that great chase scene. Remember it?
Oh, yeah. Are you talking about the one in the plane?
Oh, no, in the forest, in the jungle.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if they just nicked a little of the most dangerous game for Octopussy.
I don't know.
Maybe Live and Let Die, too, because in every James Bond movie, he gets hunted. But that's a story for another day.
Okay, Joe.
Hey, thank you very much, Frank.
Anytime. Bye-bye.
Talk soon. Bye. And that was Team 1, and here comes Team 2. I'm not a fan of cell phones. I'll just say that right up front. Here we go again. Here we go again. Live and on the air. Let's see. Next week, we have a surprise guest, but on the 24th.
Hello,
Hey, Rob.
Mr. Joe.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You are on Visual Radio Live.
Visual Radio Live, although I'm not very visual, but
I am.
but it's live. Okay, that's good. Anyway, here
Hey.
I am.
Great to hear your voice.
I missed contact earlier, but there was some kind of a difficulty in the phone lines. I don't know what it was. But here we are, and I'm glad to be on the phone with you. How are you doing?
Good. Welcome to spring. Spring is finally here.
Yeah, well, we need to be sprung. I mean, winter was winter, you know, in the greatest sense of the word.
You still get the feeling that there might be a snowstorm tomorrow, even though there won't be.
I know, but you don't even say that. That's sort of like saying, wow, isn't it great? We're driving along and there's no traffic. It's fantastic. And then you go around the bend and suddenly you hit a roadblock. So you just got to have gratitude for every moment and give thanks to wherever it comes from. You know what I mean? It's like that's it. We give thanks to wherever we get our breath from every day. Give thanks. And so we'll do that with the winter and the summer and the spring and the whole business.
Clint
Anyway,
Eastwood.
I love you. How are you?
Good.
What's going on?
I think of Clint Eastwood in absolute power. Tomorrow is promised to no one. I love quote movies.
No,
You know.
but hey, listen, that's what makes them great. Is that's great screenwriters that they come up with those sort of lines that are, you know, that are eternal, that are timeless. You know, that's the beauty of using words correctly. You know.
We'd sit in the living room and a movie would be on, and before the actors say the word, I start saying the lines, and Jeff would, I don't know if he got frustrated because he laughed. He just thought it was funny that I got them memorized.
Yeah. Well, I get that, but that's because you're like that. You're such a detail expert, and you're such an appreciator of talent and somebody that keeps track of it. Like, you know, you keep track of how good people are and how good they are relative to other people and all that sort of stuff, which a lot of people don't have the time or patience or even the inclination to do. But you're really, your standards are so high and your knowledge is so vast that, you know, you're an exceptional person in that respect. I mean, there's not many people that are your peer in that way. You know,
sometimes I can't grasp someone's performance until like the 10th viewing. Then you realize that they really have it down.
No, I know, and it's maybe not meant to be grasped by viewing. You know, maybe it's meant. I mean, because that's why, like, sometimes I listen to a record and I can listen to a record, you know, like half a dozen times and never really hear the lyrics and just get so into the groove and the music and the jungle vibe of it and that whole thing, and I'm like, yeah, this is the soundtrack for real life. And then you hear the words and the lyrics go with this soundtrack to real life, and now you've got some real magic going on. You know, you've got the combination of these great lyrics and this great vibe of music, and now you've got what becomes true art and genius, and that's really a great thing, you know.
Now, you worked on that wonderful hit record by the Rolling Stones, Heartbreaker. When you heard that, wasn't it a departure for what they were doing?
Well, not really, because it was at the time it was instrumental, and it was da 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 da, you know, and it was just this riff, and there was no lyrics, and so it was. Hold on, sorry, hold. And so anyway, no, you know, there was none of that stuff, and so, you know, it was Do Do To Do. It was just called Do Do To Do, and it was it didn't have a the further title and whatever it was, but it was just a thing that was a great riff that just developed into something. And that was one of Jimmy Miller's incredible talents, was that he knew that what making records was about, in the biggest way, was about making people shake their hips. I mean, it was like, it's because our parents, your parents, my parents, and his parents, and their parents, and going back, they were into dance music. If that was Benny Goodman or Duke Ellington or whoever it was, that eventually became disco music in the 70s. But that was still the same music. It was dance music, and it was not interpreted or thought of that way. It wasn't. People didn't relate to it that way, but it still came down to the same thing. Music, when it comes down to its most basic core, is about thing that makes your body move. And then what happened was Bob Dylan came along, and Bob Dylan came along and added this intelligence to the thing, and added this kind of cerebral thing to the music, that in the lyrics that never existed before. So, and he really basically merged folk music, which was music that was a political statement in its way, and thinly veiled and connected to actual music and the hip shaking part. But then he brought it more on the open, and then it became a full-on situation where that verbal transmission, that knowledge that was being put forth, got put together with real music, and it all started to really fuse together. And it was really the catalyst and the moment in time that, I mean, what people talk about, when was rock and roll created? I mean, yeah, you might say shake, rattle, and roll. You might say shaboom. You might say a few songs. But
That's
really,
domino.
it comes down to this thing where Bob Dylan single-handedly upended the consciousness of the lyrics in rock and roll music, and created this combination of intelligence and jungle vibe, and put them together without thinking about it or doing it consciously. But that's what happened, and it became that you were shaking your hips, and when you stopped to think about it for a second, you were learning something too, and there was something in your mind. And it might take you a half a dozen listens to something before you even got to the lyrics, because you were just into shaking your hips and into the vibe. And then after you heard it a dozen times, or half a dozen times, you started to listen to the words and were like, wow, listen to what's being said here, I think that's really a big part of all this.
I agree with you.
Cool.
And you were there for Planet Waves, which was a monumental album.
Well, it was. I mean, it was monumental in my mind, because I got to work with Bob Dylan and the band at the same time, which was the greatest gift in the world. I mean, I was the biggest fan on earth of the band, and a big fan of Bob Dylan. And little did I know, you always heard them associated with each other, but I didn't know that they never really actually made a record together. I mean, they never did. I mean, they Blonde on Blonde had some performances from some of the band members, but it did not have the whole band on the record with Bob Dylan. That didn't exist, and it never existed. And there were a few things here and there that had more band members than less. There was never a record that had the entire band on the same record as Bob Dylan. That was the first one. And so that really, in that respect, became a very special thing. And I felt more than blessed that I got to be part of that, because I idolized the band. I mean, I idolized the band because of the fact that I totally respected Bob Dylan and what his contribution to music was, but band really stirred the pot. I mean, they didn't come into the thing and use and exemplify all of their influences into an obvious amalgam of what it was. They really drew from all these sources and created a new, unique, original music, and that's what was lacking in the scene at the time. You know, that's why Eric Clapton was so flipped out. Why he quit Cream. It was like, you know, everybody's so hell bent on this music and all this stuff, but wait a second, check this out. Check out the intelligence, you know, about the band. Check out the intelligence. Check out what's being said here. Check out how much further this is going to make us all grow. You know, that's really what happened, and that's my opinion. Anyway.
No, and you had, on one hand, you had Hendrix doing all these phenomenal things with the guitar, but then you had the band doing this fabric, this musical fabric that was, you could jump into it. It was so thick.
Well, there's that, but I mean, Hendrix was an instrumentalist, but the thing about Hendrix is that he understood attitude. He understood attitude in every way. He understood attitude from the point of view of playing, from the point of view of how he dressed, from the point of view of how he spoke, from the point of view of how much he let out, how intelligent he was. He might have been the most eloquent individual on earth, but he knew that eloquence would not communicate to the average person, so he adjusted himself to try to get to the most people, and that's what's really phenomenal about Jimi Hendrix. That's how smart he was. You know, this guy was not guessing. This guy was not, you know, stabbing in the dark and throwing darts at a dartboard and hoping they stuck. I mean, this guy knew, you know, and and when you read the letters to his dad and all that stuff, that incredible thing about the every year the New York Times Magazine put out the issue what was it called? God, it had a name.
Rolling Stone yearbook thing?
No. This is New York Times Magazine, and it was called they changed our lives or something. I mean, actually, while we're talking, I'm going to go find it. And he wrote a letter to his dad, you know, and you know, Dear Al, and it's one of the most incredible things I've ever read. And he said to his dad, he said, you know, listen, Dad, he said, you may hear some music from me on the radio. Please don't be embarrassed, you know, when it doesn't sound really smart, because he said, I've realized that you've got to dumb yourself down, and you got to get to a certain point where people relate to you. And he said, so just realize that I know this, and I'm not stupid, and I'm not, you know, dumbing myself that far down. But anyway, here it is right here. It's called The Lives They Lived, right? So this is December 29th, 2002, Section 6, the New York Times Magazine. And it's on, let's see what page. This is something that everybody should read. I mean, this is really fantastic. So, okay, it's called Hey Dad. It's on page 45. Hey Dad, a letter from Jimmy, written by Wayne Compton. Okay, so it's written to James Al Hendrix, born in 1919. Hey Dad, a letter from Jimmy. In August 1965, when he wrote this letter, Jimi Hendrix was in New York City between gigs as a sideman for bands like the Isley Brothers and Jodie and the Starlighters. He was beginning to work on his own songs in a new style that would soon revolutionize popular music. In 1965, he was mostly worried about the approval of his father, Al, a former boxer and top jitterbug dancer from Vancouver, British Columbia. As a single father in Seattle, Al had raised Jimmy, then Jimi, then Jimmy, Jimmy, by himself, working odd jobs and making the payment for his son's first electric guitar. Al, who outlived Jimmy by 32 years, was always proud of his son's later success, but it was a perplexed pride. Our new experience was something altogether different, Al wrote. I'd be listening to it, and just when I thought for it to go one way, it'd go another. I thought, dadgum, he sure has added to his music. It was something for me to get used to. And then there's the letter. dear Dad, and then the rest of it. And signed, love your son Jimmy, JSMY. And so anyway, that's something for everybody to look up. I'm sure it's on the internet, but that's really one of the most telling and brilliant articles I've ever read. And it shows how he was smart and he knew what he was doing. He wasn't just, when he sang the way he sang, and he said, you got to sing out of tune. He says in the article, he said, if you're in tune all the time, you just sound normal. He said, you got to be actually out of pitch, and you actually got to be kind of not so right, and that makes you cool, And I mean, this was so calculated, man. It was like fucking amazing. I mean, amazing. But anyway.
So here's a bit of trivia. You know that bio that I wrote with you?
Yes.
On Verve and on allmusic.com.
Yes.
I was hired thanks to Jimi Hendrix's father.
Really?
Al Hendrix, God rest his soul, put out a book, My Son Jimmy. And the co-author was Jazz Obrecht at allmusic.com, okay?
Right.
Al Hendrix had Jazz write to me and say, tell Joe I really love the review. So I got this cool email from Jazz, right, from Al Hendrix, because I reviewed the book.
Yeah.
So the publicist calls me up, and it wasn't our friend Carol, another New York publicist, right? She goes, they like your writing style, they want to hire you. So I'm waiting for her to get me hired, right? She doesn't do it. 2 weeks go by, and I call her up, and I said, hey, can I contact the company and see if they'll hire me? She goes, sure. So I contacted Jazz, and they bought an interview I did, and the rest is history.
Oh, wow.
But that was Al Hendrix and Jazz Obrecht that got me hired. They liked my writing.
No, I just love that connection. I mean, that means that's the first time I've ever heard the story, and that is...
Your bio wouldn't exist without Al Hendrix.
That touches my soul, man.
Is that incredible?
It's more than incredible. And also, I saw Jimmy play in the back line. I could run a review at my high school in 1967. And he was the guitar player, and there's a guitar player in the back, white Stratocaster upside down, natural, in a suit, and you didn't know who he was, and everybody, I just remember after that for 3 weeks, all the people could talk about was, man, who that guitar player in the back on the back line there, and and nobody knew it was Jimi Hendrix. We found out about 3 weeks later, but that's who it was,
Was it Little Richard, you said?
No, this was Argentina Turner Review.
He was with Argentina, too?
Yeah, he was with Argentina. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow, that must have been incredible.
I can tell you that for sure. That was 1967, 68.
Wow.
And yeah, I was there. I mean, I saw it. I mean, with my own eyes. And I remember, because he played an upside down white Stratocaster, and he had a natural, and and he was in the suit, and he was in the back. He was in the back line. I mean, he wasn't standing out, but there was something about it. I mean, he wasn't playing those kind of solos and being Jimi Hendrix as we know Jimi Hendrix, but he was still so brilliant and so, noticeable that he stuck out, even though he was just in the back line. It was just like everybody had to know who was that guitar player. It was like the biggest question of the night. Everybody loved Argentina, but who was that guitar player? That was the question of the night,
Well, I got another little bit of trivia for you.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix played down in the Del Morocco in Nashville with Jimmy Church Band. Did you ever hear of Jimmy Church?
No.
Jimmy Church is this great artist. He's about to open a brand new hall at the Country Music Hall of Fame in a couple of months. So Jimmy Church is a friend of mine, and he had Billy Cox on bass in his band. But the guitar player before Jimi Hendrix was Bobby Hebb. So Bobby, Jimmy, and...
In his band before Jimmy, Bobby was the guitar player.
Bobby Hebb was the guitar player for Jimmy Church and Billy Cox. Billy Cox went into the Air Force with Jimmy.
Yeah.
Brings Jimmy to Nashville. Well, Bobby's heading to New York to play with Sylvia Robinson of Mickey and Sylvia.
Yeah.
It became Bobby and Sylvia. So Bobby left the Del Morocco for the Blue Morocco in New York, and Jimi Hendrix replaced him in the Jimmy Church Band. So there's a second Jimi Hendrix connection for us.
This is like really, these few things that we've talked about in the last 20 minutes are the most amazing connections that I've never heard. I mean, as long as I've known you, and I've never heard this stuff, and it's like so phenomenal what you're saying here. And it's like, see, that's the thing about you, Joe, is that like you are a true lover of this medium, and not only that, but you have integrity and you honor it. And you don't bullshit. You don't just say stuff. I mean, you know what you're talking about when you say it, and when you say it, it means something, and that's really unusual. I mean, at your age and for the amount of time you've been doing this, it's unique, and it's really, really, really to be applauded.
It's kind of fun too. But one-third Hendrix connection. You and I have one more Hendrix connection. You ready for it?
Yeah. What?
What mutual friend of ours was at a party with Jimmy in England? That's easy. Come on.
Who? Jimmy Miller?
It had to be, right? Jimmy. Jimmy was at a party with Jimi Hendrix. So there's our third Jimi Hendrix connection. 3 for 3.
Right. No, and I always tell the funny story about when I first worked with the Stones, and they were working in West LA at the Village Recorder, and Jimmy had these sandals on that were really cool. They were really kind of crude, roughly made, but dyed these interesting colors. And I said to Jimmy Miller, I said, "Hey man, those are the damn coolest sandals I've ever seen. Where'd those come from?" And he said, "Oh man, I got them at this Guatemalan store over there on Westwood Boulevard, right?" So I went over there to Westwood Boulevard and found those sandals at that store and bought some. And they were the coolest. And he and Marshall Chess bought a pair, and they were the only two. But I ended up buying a pair too. But see, Jimmy Miller and I are like, I mean, I don't know. We're like the same. We're like brothers in the same spirit. I mean, the fact that he came from percussion and drumming, the fact that his production was all based on feel, the fact that he understood things the way he did. I mean, the one thing where I had an advantage over him was I knew where to draw the line, you know, and he couldn't traverse that line the right way, and it took him out, and it made the best of him. But it's not to say that the guy wasn't one of the most brilliant record producers that ever lived. I mean, I would put him in the top 5 of all the record producers that ever lived.
I agree with you.
I think he was that good, and he was so instinctual and so, you know, effective in that way, and really most of the time, I mean, if you want to get down to like analyzing things, I mean, he was better than the artists he was working with. He had more knowledge. He wasn't necessarily the guy that was going to be the front man or something, but it was his incredible wisdom, intuitiveness that combined with the great artists made for the catalyst that made these amazing records. And nobody could duplicate that because he was a one of a kind. And nobody, I mean, and if you look at the Johns brothers, I mean, Glenn or Andy or whatever, I mean, even the people that work for him and the various people, nobody could hold a candle to him. I mean, he was just, and it was because he was just so free and so honest and so talented, and he wasn't going by some kind of formula, and it wasn't like some kind of thing he could write down and you do it like this. It was just, it's like a rabbi, like a shaman. Like he got into the spiritual side or the inside of the music and made sure that part of it was covered and was right. And then if that part of it was covered and was right, then what came out on the surface was going to be perfect. And that's what Jimmy covered. And that's what nobody knew how to do but him. I mean, he was like, Tom Dowd got close, like that, but he wasn't Jimmy Miller. And, I mean, Ahmet Ertegun, in a way, I mean, I put Jimmy and Ahmet in the same category. That's a big compliment for both of them. But there really are so few people that you could compare Jimmy Miller to, because he really was I mean, God bless him. I mean, I feel like he's a brother of mine, and I honor him to the end of my years. And I am his biggest supporter. I mean, I just know, because I know from what I do what he did, and I understand that when I'm doing what I do right, I get close to what he did, and I can tell. And it's all about vibe, and it's all about feel, and it's all feel. It's not intellectual. It's not technical. It's not it's just perfect. It's not Steely Dan. Steely Dan's the other side of the coin. Not that that's bad, but that's a different thing. But Jimmy Miller is he was like the cross between the white music and Otis Redding, or the soul singers, or Motown and the white people. He was like the cross between the two. He had all the juice of the black people, and he had the intelligence and the juice of the white people too. I mean, he was. I don't know how to give him enough accolades to put his justice into do. You know what I mean?
We were listening to a pretty poor production by someone, I forget whom, and it's probably better. And Jimmy just looked at me with a twinkle in his eye and said, "Well, Joe, there's no good or bad in production," but I knew exactly what he meant. There was. But, you can make any record and it's a production. But then there's extraordinary stuff and stuff not so extraordinary. But he had that twinkle in his eye, just knowing, you can record anything any way you want. But, and that was the intangible.
But it's either there or it's not, and it's really, in the end, it's about staying out of the way of it.
Right.
Like, if it's great, stay out of the way and let it make itself. And then at the end, you were the gatekeeper. You kept out the bandits and the gremlins, and you let the pure music come through. You guarded the gate, and that's why this came out so great. Not because you created it or you thought of it, but because you knew who to let in and who not to let in, and what to allow to go down and what to not allow to go down. And that's exactly what you're saying, and that's what he knew. I know this. I know. I mean, I loved him. I worked with him. I know.
He was so cool. He was so cool.
I mean, there's no greater appreciator of Jimmy Miller than Rob Fraboni. There isn't one.
We got to find the Coal Gems record he made when he was 19 years old. He was a singer at 19. He made a record on Coal Gems. I've never found it, but we got to start looking for it again.
Uh-huh.
So he started as a singer with Larry Fallon. Larry Fallon produced Brandy, You're a Fine Girl, The Looking Glass.
Yeah, and Larry Fallon was involved with Van Morrison, too, at some point.
Right. So Jimmy and Larry had a trio, and Jimmy was the drummer, and Larry might have played guitar, I forget. But Larry was a great guy. He's gone now, too.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he put strings on Wild Horses that never came out. We'll have to have that tracked down and put on a box set,
I've never heard that. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, Larry Fallon put strings on Wild Horses, but they never used it.
Uh-huh.
But anyways, it's we got another minute and a half left, Rob. We had a great show. You got to be in studio sometime.
Well, listen. I mean, I'd love to come to the studio with you, but I'm just saying, I'm just giving you a few little tidbits here and there. But I mean, the main thing is that what's come out of this conversation is our love of Jimmy Miller, and God bless him. I mean, this guy deserves. I mean, it's like the Lincoln Memorial, right? And you got Lincoln in this chair, and then Lincoln Memorial, and then there's Nikola Tesla, who's responsible for 95% of the electrical 20th century. He's got a miniature of the Lincoln Memorial in Niagara Falls. Well, along that line, there should be something like that for Jimmy Miller. I mean, Jimmy Miller is really George Martin is the guy that first comes to mind as the producer of all time, sure, he was good, but because he also worked with the band that was, let's face it, the Beatles were the Beatles, okay? So.
And our time is up.
But I'm saying.
Our time is up. We're going to be off the air in a second.
Okay. But compared to that, Jimmy Miller would be like George Martin. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you. Rob Fraboni, great talking to you, man. We'll be in touch.
All right, man.
Thanks for being on the show.
I love you, man. Thank you.
Love you, too. Thanks.
We'll talk soon. Okay.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
And that's our show.